Welcome to another episode of Cassis Belly Baby. Your host Cam Ray. Last left off a while ago on Moses. I believe it was part 2. Well, this is Moses part 3. This is one about, we're going to discuss about the citizen army. Alright, let's begin. A citizen army. Once the Hebrews crossed the Sea of Reeds, they turned south for a time before heading east again. Some believe that the Hebrews were wandering aimlessly through the desert. However, one has to be careful calling them a wandering group. They were not wandering aimlessly in the desert. Moses knew exactly where he was taking them. Moses had lived in the Midianite lands for 40 years. To suggest that he knew not the terrain that he led the Hebrews through would be an error. As a shepherd and, likely, a businessman, Moses knew the terrain and people passing through it. Moses had many connections, and one of them with his own Midianite in-laws. Because of these connections, there is no question that not only did his in-laws know that he was heading back into Egypt, but that they were kept in contact with him during the ordeal and awaiting his arrival. While some of these people were accustomed to such conditions, particularly the military wing, many more lacked the skills needed to survive in the desert. This is where the Midianites come in to help guide, support, and instruct the mixed multitude on how to live off the land and survive in the desert. The Hebrews were not a desert nomadic people. The Battle of Rephidim. This is going to be the test. Well, actually, it's going to test the Hebrews' ability, but at the same time, it's going to make them into warriors. In a way, you could say it's their first bloodening on the field of battle. The Battle of Rephidim. As the Hebrews continued to move, they were tired, thirsty, dangerously low on water, and unaware that they were being watched. The Midianite and Hebrew scouts ahead of the multitude found a suitable source of water at Rephidim. While the Hebrews were taking their turns collecting water for themselves and their livestock, they were unaware that the Amalekites had been scouting the area. A rather large Amalekite warrior band was taking part in an Asiatic invasion pushing west to take advantage of a weakened Egypt. The Amalekites sent a small scouting party ahead of the main force and so discovered the Hebrews collecting water at Rephidim. Upon further investigation, the Amalekites noticed that the rear column of the Hebrews was unsupervised, lacked security, and weak. It was a prime opportunity. While the vast majority of the Hebrews were preoccupied with collecting water, the Amalekites fell upon the weaker group. They ambushed, killed, spoiled, and quickly disappeared. News of the Amalekite ambush promptly made it to Moses, who realized that retaliation was out of the question because night was upon them. That night, Moses drew up his plans. Being familiar with the Amalekites due to living in the Midianite lands for many decades, he would have understood their method of warfare and the terrain best suited to engage them. Moses, knowing that the Amalekite warriors were a camel-riding force, summoned his best commander, Joshua, to his tent. Why Joshua? The military historian Richard Gabriel points out that the choice of Joshua, quote, may have been based upon his reputation among the Israelite Hebrew mercenaries acquired when he served with Pharaoh's armies in Egypt as a competent fighter and commander, end quote. Because of his reputation and knowledge of both the Hebrew and Egyptian way of war, he was the prime candidate for the job. Moses not only placed Joshua in charge of leading the men in a battle, but also instructed Joshua to, quote, choose us out men and go out, fight with Amalek, end quote. The Hebrew military wing at Joshua's disposal is not enough. He must go through the camp searching out able-bodied men, especially those with some martial experience, to take part in conflict. Arm them with the weapons they took from Egypt, and on top of that, quickly train the new recruits to be able to fight as a disciplined battalions. Moses promises Joshua that during tomorrow's engagement, he will, quote, stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand, end quote. While many see this as a divine act, in reality Moses was doing what all leaders, past, present, and future, know to do, and that is to be seen. Moses, in view of his soldiers, is a morale booster, providing them with reassurance that not only is he there with his men, but so is the rod that represents God. The next day, both armies lined up on the sandy plain of Rephidim. The spot chosen by Moses and Joshua to face the Amalekite warriors was on a narrow plain that incorporated hills of modest size to protect the Hebrew flanks from being enveloped by the Amalekite camels. The Hebrew front rank probably consisted of two lines of experienced seasoned soldiers who were armed with spear and shield and were arranged in a phalanx formation. Once in formation, the front rank struck the butt of the spear in the ground at a 45-degree angle, took a knee. The second rank was standing, holding their spears straight out. Behind this line of heavy infantry was the light infantry, who were armed with the Egyptian khopesh or sickle sword. It was their job to fight in close coordination with the heavy infantry. Their role was to harass the enemy and to kill any camel unit that broke through the front ranks. In the middle of this formation would be archers armed with the Egyptian composite bow, which had greater range and penetrating power than the bows used by the Amalekites. Hebrew slingers may have been on top of the hills, from which they could launch tennis ball-sized projectiles 300 yards. The battle started with a show of force, followed by both sides skirmishing for a time. Small Amalekite camel units rushed forward, attempting to poke and prod the front lines, only to be turned back by the missile fire of the Hebrews. It is doubtful that the Amalekites committed to an all-out battle with the Hebrews due to the wall of tightly packed spears preventing their frontal assault. Along with being under the barrage of heavy missile fire consisting of arrows and rocks, as the hours passed, the Amalekites continued to charge and turn away. Meantime, Moses became weak from standing and his arms became weary from signaling. Aaron and Hur were aware of Moses' weakness and found a rock for him to sit on. It is interesting to note that when, quote, Moses held up his hands, that Israel prevailed, and when he let them down his hand, Amalek prevailed, end quote. In other words, Moses' weakness demoralizes the Hebrews, which is a morale booster for the enemy. The Amalekites took advantage of the demoralized Hebrews. In order to help Moses keep signaling in commands to Joshua, both Aaron and Hur held up Moses' arms. Once the Hebrews see their commander back in charge, they quickly regain their confidence, in which, quote, Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. End quote. However, Joshua never defeated them with the, quote, edge of the sword. End quote. The key word here goes unnoticed is discomfited. In the Hebrew text, the word is chalash, which means to be weak or prostrate. In other words, Joshua did not give chase, but stubbornly stood his ground, frustrating the Amalekites and leading to weakness and exhaustion in both man and beast. The Amalekite commander decided that it was best to turn around before suffering something far worse, which they likely did at dusk. The description of the battle and what took place is mere conjecture, but it does make tactical sense. With the Battle of Rephidim, while the Battle of Rephidim was a Hebrew victory, it showed the Hebrews that even though victorious in battle, they were not prepared. Because of this dilemma, the first Hebrew National Defense Force was born at Sinai. Establishment of checks and balances. While the Bible provides scant detail concerning the Battle of Rephidim as to the overall makeup and organization of the Hebrew army, one begins to see a clearer picture of how the army will look once they reach Sinai. But in order to establish an army, they need to establish an identity. At Sinai, Moses reunited with his family. After the joy of reunion was over, Moses began his duties of judging the people, which lasted from morning unto evening. After court was adjourned, Jethro approached Moses and questioned why he does this. Moses explains to him that people come to settle disputes and seek Yahweh's guidance. Jethro felt that it was too much for one man to handle and advised Moses if he were to continue, he would, quote, surely weary away, end quote, and explained to Moses that, quote, this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone, end quote. Concerned over Moses' health, Jethro makes a proposal. Let the tribal elders and leaders take command and judge their own tribes, clans, and individuals. What Jethro is proposing to Moses is to adopt a bureaucratic system based on centralized management to deal with the mixed multitude. Moses adopts Jethro's advice, but a problem arises. Martin Sicker, in his book, The Rise and Fall of the Ancient Israelite States, makes a fine point that, quote, Moses was raised in the palace of a powerful king who had massive civil and military bureaucracy at his disposal, end quote. Moses needed no advice, even though it is said that he adopted Jethro's recommendation. Moses had been preparing for this all along. Moses knew how a government organization worked, being a scion of Egypt. The problem he dealt with was how to treat the various tribes fairly. Instead of centralizing the multitude into a single homogeneous constituency on the advice of Jethro, Moses decided to take a similar but narrower path. Moses decided to single out the non-Israelites by focusing on the Israelites. Quote, and Moses chose able men out of Israel, and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, rulers of tens. And they judged the people at all seasons. The hard cases they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. End quote. By establishing a bureaucratic system among the Israelites, in which judges and chiefs handle minor matters, leaving the hard ones to Moses, he strengthened the blood ties of the tribal, clan, and family units to preserve Israel's identity to serve Yahweh. Had Moses centralized the entire mixed population under a single cohesive collective tribe united on common theme, which was a dissatisfaction, how should I put it? Disaffection for Egypt. It would have proven disastrous later on. Moses understood that the Israelite tribal element would slowly erode once land and authority were distributed among the 12 tribes. In other words, once the tribes were settled, decentralization would naturally occur, effectively transforming the Israelites from wandering pastoral nomads to agrarian, sedentary state builders in the Promised Land. But if an Israelite nation is to be established, Moses decided that a symbol of authority, a police force, and an army are needed. Keeping the peace. In order to keep the peace and maintain discipline among the Hebrews, Moses created a chain to command. To solidify this, Yahweh instructs Moses to construct a tabernacle, stating, quote, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. End quote. The tabernacle Moses is supposedly ordered by Yahweh to build is nothing more than a carbon copy structure that others in the region have built before and after. The tabernacle was around 15 feet by 45 feet, and the area around the structure was roughly 100 feet by 75 feet. And the material used for the structure was, quote, gold, silver, and brass, and blue and purple scarlet, and fine linen, and goat's hair, and ram skins dyed red, and badger skins, and shittim wood, oil for the light, spices for anointing oil, and for sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. Once taken down, the structure was transported by 6 wagons. It was pulled by 2 oxen each. However, the Hebrew tabernacle is not unique. It's impressive, but it's not unique. The reason why, the Mari text from the 18th century BCE and the Arat text from the 13th century BCE mention structures similar to the tabernacle that were erected on special days. On these special days, the gods left their temple to congregate in these man-made, quote, holy of holies, end quote. One Mari text mentions a similar structure that was supposedly 10 wooden frame, supported by 10 wooden frames that took 43 men to transport. Moreover, the Egyptian war tent of Ramses II at the Battle of Kadesh in 1275 BCE is similar to the Hebrew tabernacle. Ramses' tent was a rectangular structure within the much larger rectangular camp. Within Pharaoh's camp stood a rectangular reception tent, similar to the holy place. The tent adjacent to Pharaoh's chamber displayed 2 winged deities, Horus flanking the Pharaoh's cartouche. Its likeness was similar to the Holy of Holies and the 2 cherubim. The construction of the Hebrew tabernacle, like that of their neighbors, is similar in what it represents, and that it's just power. Moses knew that in order to control the Israelites, he needed a centralized symbol of authority that illuminated the power of heaven and his right as Yahweh's regent to command on earth. Such a symbol of It's a symbol of mobile authority, means little unless you have a guard to enforce its celestial will. And you know who guarded that celestial will? That guard was assigned to the Levites. Now let's talk about the Levites. The Levites. What are the Levites exactly? Besides, we all know that them being a tribe related to the rest of the 11 other tribes of Israel. The Levites, a priestly tribe, a tribe that received no territorial lands, were dispersed to live among the tribes. The reason for their dispersal was due to their anger and cruelty towards other animals. Jacob, the father of Levi, condemned the actions of his son along with his other son, Simeon. Even though the Levites were landless, they were given a role. They were given a role as the spiritual physicians among the Israelites to teach the law of God and enforce the law of Moses. While many see them as a priesthood that looked after the physical and spiritual health of the citizens, the fact of the matter is they were nothing of the sort. While Jacob saw them as instruments of violence who deserved little, Moses saw them as a tool to control the crowd. Moses decided that this semi-ostracized tribe was the perfect fit to serve. Remember, Simeon's also a, you could say, semi-ostracized tribe along with Levi. They were disenfranchised, prone to violence, and would be the ideal police force to enforce the will of Moses. It was a family affair. Therefore, Moses decided that, quote, the Levites from among the children of Israel, instead of all their firstborn that openeth the matrix among the children of Israel, therefore the Levites shall be mine, end quote. Once the Levites swear loyalty to Moses, Moses now has the leverage he needs to enforce his will. While lacking territorial inheritance and being exempt from military service, the Levites were given cities to dwell in. We'll get to that. The Lord commanded Moses to give, quote, the Levites of the inheritance of the possession cities to dwell in, and ye shall give also unto the Levites suburbs for the cities around about them, end quote. Of course, they would not acquire these partial plots of property until after the conquest of Canaan. But there is more to it. Moses, looking ahead, knew that when the time came, whether during his lifetime or not, once the conquest was complete, the Levites and the Israelites would no longer be living within the same radius. In order to keep his guard front and center, Moses ensured that the Levites would live among the tribes to protect the king, Lord, and his regent, Moses, or whoever succeeds him, from the possibility of internal heretical insurgency. That day would come, and the Levites would be put that day would come, and the Levites would be put to the test. While Moses was atop Mount Sinai receiving the Ten Commandments, the Israelites grew weary of his long absence. Here comes some of the test. Quote, and when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mountain, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, up make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us out of the land of Egypt, we want not what is become of him. End quote. The Israelites are obviously tired, hungry, scared, and wondering when they will get to the land of milk and honey. Uncertainty runs rampant throughout the camp. In order to please the masses, Aaron orders them to bring gold to produce a golden calf. They need a comforter. Once the idol is finished, Aaron, quote, built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation and said, tomorrow is the feast of the Lord, end quote. The next day the Israelites sang praises, feasted, danced, got butt naked, and made burnt offerings. When Moses returned to camp with the tablets in hand, he was mortified at what he saw. Moses broke the tablets, gave orders for the idol to be destroyed, and shunned the Israelites. Once this was done, Moses, quote, stood at the gates of the camp and said, Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves unto Moses, end quote. Moses could not let this go unpunished and ordered the Levites, his personal guard, to, quote, put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor, end quote. The Levites slaughtered 3,000 people that day, possibly more. Moses' actions against the Israelites on that day made it clear that there is no choice, no democracy, and no free will except the divine will of Moses. In other words, the man who went from freeing the Israelites has now become a tyrannical dictator. To make matters worse, and what appears to be overlooked, is that Aaron, who happened to be in charge of the Levites, agreed to the building and worshiping of an idol. One would think that Moses would have punished his brother Aaron, who obviously was placed in charge while Moses was away. Instead, Aaron succumbed to the will of the people and constructed an idol, which was rallied around and celebrated like heathens. Moses cannot punish Aaron because Yahweh, according to Moses, supposedly ordains the Levites, and if Moses were to punish the Levites, he would risk much, particularly his politically divine position among the people. This would not be the end of the Levite police force. Many more instances would occur later on with the death of Moses. The Levitical guard went with Joshua once he took command of the Israelites. We read less about the Levites' role as personal guards and much more about them taking the role as priests and guardians of the ark at the time. After the horrors the Israelites suffered in the wilderness at the hands of the Levites, it seems that Joshua had enough and demoted the Levites to ensure the security of his power and to protect the Israelites from further abuse. Now, if you like this mini lecture, give me a thumbs up. Leave your comments below. No fighting. Go ahead and share this. You can share any of these lectures, by the way. They're free. Just share them. Tell your friends about them. And the next time we come back, we'll continue on with Moses and the military history of ancient Israel. And we'll talk about the creation of the Israelite army. So, until next time.